My name is Sarah. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who holds grudges. I always believed in second chances. I thought forgiveness was a choice we make to free ourselves. But sitting here today, 3 years after my wedding, I realize some wounds cut too deep. Some things can't be forgiven. At least not yet. My husband Mark is a good man. He has kind eyes and gentle hands. He makes me laugh when I'm sad. He brings me coffee in bed every morning. When I married him, I thought I was marrying just him. I was wrong. You don't just marry a person. You marry their whole family, their history, their baggage, their secrets. Mark's parents seemed nice at first. His mother, Linda, was all smiles and warm hugs. His father, Robert, was quiet but polite. They welcomed me with open arms. They said they loved me like a daughter. They said I was perfect for Mark. I believed them. I wanted to believe them. The first red flag came during our engagement party. Linda pulled me aside in the kitchen. She was washing dishes with shaky hands. "Sarah, honey," she said, not looking at me. "Mark has always been sensitive. He needs someone strong." I smiled. "I know. We're good for each other." She turned to face me then. Her eyes were different. Cold. "What I mean is, he can't handle stress well. Sometimes it's better to keep things from him, to protect him." I didn't understand then. I thought she was being a caring mother. Now I know she was teaching me their family rule: lie to keep the peace. The second red flag should have been obvious. Mark never talked about his childhood. When I asked, he'd change the subject. When I pushed, he'd get quiet and sad. His shoulders would slump. His voice would get small. "It was fine," he'd say. "Normal family stuff." But normal families don't make their children afraid to remember. Normal families don't teach their kids that silence is safety. I learned the truth 6 months after our wedding. It came out in pieces, like a puzzle made of broken glass. The first piece fell into place during Thanksgiving dinner. We were at Mark's parents' house. Linda had made a huge meal. The table was beautiful. Everything looked perfect. But Mark was tense. I could see it in the way he held his fork, the way he checked his phone every few minutes. Robert was telling a story about Mark's baseball team in high school. He was laughing, but his laugh was mean. "Mark was always the worst player," Robert said. "Coach only kept him on the team because I donated money. Remember that, Mark? Remember how you cried after every game?" Mark's face went red. He looked down at his plate. "Dad, please," he whispered. "What?" "It's funny now. You were such a crybaby. Good thing you found other talents, right, Sarah?" Robert winked at me, like we shared a secret, like humiliating his son was something to bond over. I felt sick. Linda just smiled and passed the potatoes. Like nothing happened. Like her husband hadn't just torn down their son in front of his new wife. I put my hand on Mark's leg under the table. He was shaking. That night, Mark couldn't sleep. He kept tossing and turning. Finally, I asked him about dinner. "It's always been like that," he said into the darkness. "Dad likes to remind me of my failures. Mom pretends it's not happening. They call it family tradition. That's not normal, Mark. That's cruel." "I know," he whispered. "But they're my parents. What else can I do?" The second piece came during Christmas. Mark's brother Tom was visiting with his kids. The house was full of noise and chaos. Linda was in her element, playing the perfect grandmother. Robert was telling the kids stories about the good old days. I was helping in the kitchen when I overheard Tom talking to Mark in the hallway. "Remember when Dad locked you in the basement?" Tom was laughing. You were down there for hours, crying and begging. I thought it was hilarious. I was 7, Tom. Yeah, but you should have just followed the rules. Dad always said you were too emotional, too sensitive. He was just trying to toughen you up. I dropped the dish I was holding. It shattered on the floor. The conversation stopped. Linda rushed over. Oh, honey, are you okay? Don't worry about the mess. But I wasn't worried about the dish. I was worried about my husband. My gentle, kind husband who flinched every time someone raised their voice. My husband who apologized for everything. My husband who had been locked in a basement as a child for being too emotional. That night, I confronted Mark. They locked you in the basement? He was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. When I cried or got upset, Dad said it was discipline. Mom said it was for my own good. It worked, I guess. I stopped crying. Mark, that's abuse. They abused you. He shook his head fast. No, no. They were just strict. Lots of parents are strict. Strict parents don't lock their children in basements. Strict parents don't humiliate their kids at dinner. Mark, what they did to you was wrong. He started crying then. Not the pretty crying you see in movies. The ugly kind. The kind that comes from years of buried pain. I can't think that way, he sobbed. If I admit they abused me, then what? They're all I have. They're my family. I held him while he cried. I made promises I wasn't sure I could keep. I told him we'd figure it out together. I told him he was safe now. But inside, something had changed. Something hard and angry was growing in my chest. How dare they? How dare they hurt this beautiful man and then pretend to love him? How dare they smile at me while knowing what they'd done? The third piece came during Mark's birthday dinner. We had invited his parents to our house. I cooked his favorite meal. I decorated the dining room. I wanted it to be special for him. Everything was going well until Robert started drinking. He got mean when he drank. Meaner than usual. Sarah, this chicken is a little dry, he said, pushing his plate away. Linda makes it better. Maybe you should get the recipe. Mark tensed beside me. The chicken is fine, Dad. I'm just saying, your mother is a better cook. No offense, Sarah. You'll learn. I forced a smile. None taken. But Robert wasn't done. He never was when he had an audience. Speaking of learning, when are you two going to give us grandchildren? Mark's not getting any younger. Though with his genes, maybe it's better to wait. Don't want to pass on any weaknesses. The silence was deafening. Mark's face went white. Linda was staring at her plate. What do you mean? I asked. My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking. Robert grinned. It was an ugly grin. Well, Mark's always been fragile. Emotional problems run in families, you know. His grandfather was the same way. Couldn't handle life. Ended up in the hospital a few times. Mental hospital, I mean. Dad, stop, Mark whispered. What? It's true. Remember when you were 16? All that crying and dramatic nonsense? We had to get you help. What did that doctor call it? Depression? Anxiety? Something like that. Mark stood up fast. His chair fell over. I'm going for a walk, he said. His voice was shaking. See what I mean? Robert said to me as Mark left. Too sensitive. Always has been. After they left, I found Mark sitting in our backyard. He was staring at nothing. Why didn't you tell me about the hospital? I asked gently. He looked at me with such pain in his eyes. Because I knew you'd see me differently. I knew you'd think I was broken. Mark, you're not broken. You were a kid dealing with trauma. Getting help was brave. My dad doesn't think so. He says I embarrassed the family. That real men don't need therapy. I sat beside him on the grass. The anger in my chest was burning now. Your father is wrong about a lot of things. But what if he's right? What if I am too weak? What if I pass that on to our kids? I turned to face him fully. Listen to me. You are not weak. You are not broken. You survived parents who hurt you and told you it was love. You got help when you needed it. You built a life for yourself. That's not weakness. That's strength. He cried again that night, but this time it felt different, like something was breaking open inside him, like truth was finally finding air. The fourth piece was the worst. It came a month later when Linda called me. Sarah, honey, I need to talk to you about something important. She sounded serious, worried. I thought maybe something was wrong with Robert. Of course. What is it? It's about Mark. About his problems. What problems? His emotional issues. His depression. I know Robert mentioned it at dinner. I wanted to explain. I waited. My stomach was getting tight. Mark has always been difficult, she continued. Even as a baby, he cried too much. As he got older, it got worse. He was so dramatic about everything, so sensitive. We tried everything to help him, like locking him in the basement. Silence. Then a laugh. A cold, empty laugh. Oh, that. Boys need discipline, Sarah. We weren't mean. We were trying to teach him that the world isn't soft. That tears don't solve problems. He was 7. He was old enough to learn control. Look, I'm not calling to debate parenting methods. I'm calling because I'm worried about you. Worried about me? Being married to someone with Mark's issues, it's hard. I should know. His father has similar problems, though he handles them better. I just want you to know what you're dealing with. My hands were shaking now. What exactly am I dealing with, Linda? Mark will always need more than normal people. More attention, more patience, more understanding. He'll probably have breakdowns. He might need medication again. Are you prepared for that? Because once you have children, it gets harder. Much harder. I could barely speak. Are you trying to warn me away from your own son? I'm trying to prepare you for reality. I love Mark, but I also know his limitations. If you're not ready for a lifetime of managing his emotions, it's better to know now. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for an hour. Just sat there, staring at the wall. Linda had called her own son a burden. She had warned me away from him like he was damaged goods. She had talked about his pain like it was a character flaw. That's when the anger really took hold. That's when I knew I would never forgive them. The breaking point came during Easter Sunday. We were all at church together, playing the perfect family. Linda had her arm around me during the service. Robert was singing hymns in his deep voice. Mark was holding my hand, trying to look happy. The sermon was about forgiveness, about letting go of anger, about loving those who hurt us. I sat there listening, feeling like a hypocrite. Everyone around me was nodding and saying, Amen. I was thinking about how much I hated my in-laws. After church, we went to their house for lunch. Linda had made a big meal again. She was showing off for the relatives who joined us, playing the loving mother and devoted wife. Mark was helping her in the kitchen. I heard her talking to him in a low voice. You look tired, honey. Are you taking care of yourself? I'm fine, Mom. Because Sarah mentioned you've been having trouble sleeping. Are you getting anxious again? Do you need to see someone? I walked into the kitchen. Mark looked embarrassed. I never said that, I told Linda. She smiled that fake smile. Oh, I must have misunderstood. I just worry about his mental health, you know. It's always been fragile. His mental health is fine. Of course, dear. I just meant that with his history. Stop. The word came out harder than I meant it to. Linda blinked. Excuse me. Stop talking about him like he's broken. Stop talking about his problems and his history. Stop treating him like he's damaged. The kitchen went quiet. Mark was staring at me with wide eyes. Sarah, Linda said carefully, I think you're misunderstanding. No. I understand perfectly. You abused your son. You locked him in basements and called it discipline. You humiliated him and called it tough love. You made him believe he was weak and wrong and too much. And now you want me to see him the same way. Linda's face changed. The mask slipped. For a second, I saw something ugly underneath. I think you're being very unfair, she said. We did our best with a difficult child. He wasn't difficult. He was 7. He was a little boy who needed love and got cruelty instead. Sarah, please, Mark whispered. Don't do this. But I couldn't stop. 3 years of watching them tear him down. 3 years of their fake smiles and backhanded comments. 3 years of pretending their abuse was normal. You know what's difficult? I continued. Living with the damage you caused. Watching my husband apologize for existing. Seeing him flinch when people raise their voices. Holding him while he has nightmares about being locked in dark places. Linda's eyes filled with tears. Crocodile tears. How dare you judge us? You don't know what it was like raising him. You don't know how hard it was. Hard for you. You're not the one who lived in fear. You're not the one who learned that love comes with conditions. You're not the one who still thinks he's too much, too sensitive, too emotional. Robert appeared in the doorway. He'd heard everything. I think you need to leave, he said. His voice was quiet and dangerous. Gladly. I grabbed Mark's hand. He was shaking, but he followed me. We left through the back door, past all the relatives who were pretending not to stare. In the car, Mark was silent. I was breathing hard, my heart racing from the confrontation. I'm sorry, I said. I know you didn't want me to. Thank you. His voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear him. What? He turned to look at me. His eyes were wet, but he was smiling. Thank you. No one has ever defended me like that. No one has ever told them they were wrong. We sat in their driveway for a few minutes, both of us crying, both of us shaking. But for the first time in 3 years, Mark looked free. We drove home in silence, but it wasn't the heavy silence we'd carried before. It was the silence of a storm that had finally passed. Mark kept reaching over to touch my hand, like he needed to make sure I was real. That what had just happened was real. At home, we sat on our couch and talked for hours. Really talked. Mark told me things he'd never said before. About being afraid to come out of his room as a child. About learning to cry silently so his father wouldn't hear. About the therapist who'd told him his feelings were valid, and how his parents had called that doctor a quack afterward. I stopped going to therapy because they said it was making me worse, he said. They said I was becoming too self-aware, and it was making me selfish. You know that's not true, right? He nodded slowly. I'm starting to. Thanks to you. That night, Mark slept better than he had in months. No tossing and turning. No nightmares. He woke up and said he felt different. Lighter. It's like I can finally breathe, he said. But even as Mark began to heal, the anger in my chest remained. If anything, it grew stronger. Now that he was starting to see the truth about his childhood, I could see the full extent of the damage. Every apology he made for nothing, every time he second-guessed himself, every moment of self-doubt, it all traced back to them. Linda called the next day. She was crying. "Sarah, honey, I think there was a misunderstanding yesterday." "No misunderstanding. I love my son. We both do. We're not perfect parents, but we did our best." "Your best included psychological torture." That's a very harsh way to put it. It's an accurate way to put it. She was quiet for a moment. Then her voice changed. Became harder. "I don't know what Mark has told you, but children don't always remember things correctly. They exaggerate. They make things sound worse than they were." "Are you saying he's lying?" "I'm saying his perception might be colored by his mental health issues." And there it was. Even now, even caught in their cruelty, she was still blaming him. Still making it his fault for being too sensitive to handle their abuse. "Don't call here again," I said and hung up. Robert tried a different approach. He came to our house the following weekend. Mark was at the store, so it was just me who answered the door. "I think we need to talk," he said. I let him in because I was curious. What could he possibly say to justify what they'd done? He sat in our living room, looking around at our photos and furniture, taking inventory of our life. "You're young," he said finally. "You don't understand how marriage works yet. Enlighten me." "Marriage is about loyalty, about supporting your spouse's family, even when it's hard, even when you disagree with them, even when they abuse children." His face darkened. "We never abused anyone. We were strict parents raising a difficult child in a different time. What we did was normal then. Locking children in basements was never normal. It was discipline. It worked. Mark learned to control himself. Mark learned to be afraid. Same thing sometimes." I stared at him. The casual cruelty in that statement took my breath away. "You broke your son," I said quietly. "You took a sensitive, loving child and you taught him that his emotions were wrong, that he was wrong, that love had to be earned through suffering." Robert shrugged. "He turned out fine. He has nightmares. He apologizes for breathing. He thinks he's too much for everyone he meets. That's not fine. That's just his personality. That's trauma." We sat in silence for a moment. Then Robert leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. "You're going to apologize to my wife. You're going to stop filling Mark's head with nonsense about his childhood. And you're going to remember that we're family." "Or what?" "Or Mark loses his family. All of it. Parents, brother, cousins, everyone. Is that what you want? To isolate him completely?" I felt something cold wash over me. This was their final weapon. The threat of abandonment. They'd trained Mark to fear losing them, even though keeping them meant losing himself. "Get out of my house," I said. Robert stood up slowly. "Think about what I said, Sarah. Think about what's best for Mark." After he left, I sat in that same spot for an hour, thinking about his threat, thinking about Mark's face when he talked about losing his family, thinking about the choice I was being forced to make, enable his abusers or risk his isolation. When Mark came home, I told him about the visit. I told him about the ultimatum. "They want me to choose," I said. between protecting you and keeping them happy. Mark was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that surprised me. What if we chose each other instead? What do you mean? What if we stopped trying to make this work with them? What if we just built our own family? Just us. I looked at my husband. Really looked at him. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked strong. Determined. Are you sure? I'm sure. I can't keep pretending they love me the way I need to be loved. I can't keep hoping they'll change. And I can't ask you to pretend either. That night, we wrote a letter together. We explained that we needed space, that we wouldn't be attending family gatherings anymore, that we loved them but couldn't accept how we were being treated. We mailed it the next day. They called dozens of times, left voicemails ranging from angry to pleading to manipulative. Linda cried about losing her son. Robert threatened to cut Mark out of the will. Tom called Mark selfish and ungrateful. We changed our phone number. The months that followed were unlike anything I'd experienced. Mark and I had to learn how to be a family of two. We had to figure out holidays and birthdays without the complicated dance of managing his parents' emotions. We had to create new traditions, new ways of celebrating, new definitions of what family meant. At first, it was terrifying. Mark went through periods of intense guilt. He'd wake up in the middle of the night, convinced he'd made a mistake. He'd worry that he was being ungrateful, that he was hurting people who loved him. The programming ran deep. 30 years of being told that questioning his parents meant betraying them didn't disappear overnight. I went through my own struggles. The anger I'd carried for so long didn't just vanish because we'd cut contact. If anything, it intensified. Without the immediate target of their presence in our lives, the rage turned inward. I was angry at myself for not seeing it sooner, for not protecting Mark better, for all the times I'd smiled and played nice while they tore him down. We started going to therapy together. Our counselor, Dr. Martinez, was patient and kind. She helped us understand that what we were experiencing was normal, that children of abusive parents often struggle with guilt when they set boundaries, that spouses of abuse survivors carry their own trauma from witnessing the damage. Anger is a normal response to injustice, she told me during one of our sessions. The question isn't whether your anger is justified. It absolutely is. The question is what you want to do with it. I thought about that for weeks. What did I want to do with my anger? I'd been carrying it like a weapon, ready to use it to defend Mark at any moment. But the battles were over now. We'd won by walking away. So what was I supposed to do with all this rage? Mark was making progress faster than I was. Without the constant stress of managing his parents' reactions, he began to bloom. He laughed more. He stopped apologizing for every small thing. He started expressing opinions without immediately backtracking. He took up photography, something he'd always wanted to try but never felt he deserved. I feel like I'm meeting myself for the first time, he told me one evening as we looked through his photos. Like I'm finally allowed to exist. Watching him discover himself was beautiful and heartbreaking. Beautiful because he was becoming the person he'd always been underneath the damage. Heartbreaking because I could see all the years he'd lost, all the parts of himself he'd hidden away to survive. My anger began to shift during this time. Instead of the hot, immediate rage I'd felt before, it settled into something colder and more permanent. I understood now that I would never forgive Linda and Robert. Not because I couldn't, but because I wouldn't. Forgiveness requires some form of acknowledgement, some recognition of wrongdoing. They would never admit what they'd done. They would never say they were sorry. They would never take responsibility for the damage they'd caused. And that was okay. I was learning that forgiveness isn't always necessary for healing. Sometimes, the healthiest thing you can do is simply refuse to carry someone else's shame. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is stay angry on behalf of someone who was taught they didn't deserve protection. We started hosting our own holiday celebrations. Thanksgiving became a day of gratitude for the life we'd built together. Christmas became about creating joy without walking on eggshells. Mark's birthday became a true celebration instead of an endurance test. We invited friends who loved us without conditions, who celebrated Mark's sensitivity instead of treating it like a flaw. Our house became a sanctuary. Mark could cry when he needed to without anyone telling him he was being dramatic. He could get excited about things without being mocked. He could have bad days without being made to feel guilty about them. For the first time in his life, he had a home where all of his emotions were welcome. I watched him heal, and slowly, I began to heal too. Not from forgiving his parents, I knew that would never happen, but from letting go of the responsibility to make them understand. I stopped imagining conversations where I finally said the perfect thing that would make them realize their mistakes. I stopped rehearsing arguments in my head. I stopped waiting for apologies that would never come. The anger didn't disappear, but it transformed. Instead of consuming me, it became fuel for something better. It motivated me to be the kind of person Mark should have had in his life from the beginning. It drove me to learn about trauma and healing. It pushed me to create the safe space he'd never had as a child. 1 year after we'd gone no contact, Mark got a letter from his mother. It was full of guilt trips and manipulative language, designed to make him feel responsible for her pain. The old Mark would have called her immediately, apologizing and promising to visit. The new Mark read it once, handed it to me, and said, "Should we file this with the others?" We'd started keeping all their attempts at contact in a folder, partly for legal reasons if they ever escalated, partly as a reminder of why we'd made the choice we did. The folder was thick with letters, cards, and printed emails. Each one followed the same pattern: denial, blame, guilt, and ultimatums. "I don't feel guilty anymore," Mark told me that night. "I keep waiting for the guilt to come back, but it doesn't. I just feel free." That's when I realized that my anger had served its purpose. It had been the bridge between the life where Mark was slowly dying inside and the life where he could finally thrive. It had given me the strength to fight for him when he couldn't fight for himself. It had been the fuel for every difficult conversation, every boundary we'd set, every time I'd refused to pretend their behavior was acceptable. I understood then that some anger is sacred. Some anger is holy. The anger that protects the innocent, that stands up to bullies, that refuses to let abuse continue, that anger is a gift. It's love in its fiercest form. It's justice demanding to be heard. I would never forgive Mark's parents because forgiveness would require me to minimize their crimes. It would require me to pretend that what they did wasn't that bad, that their intentions mattered more than their impact, that family bonds excuse abuse. I refused to do that. I refused to participate in the lie that had kept Mark trapped for 30 years. Instead, I chose something harder and more honest. I chose to remember. I chose to bear witness to what they'd done. I chose to honor Mark's pain by never pretending it was acceptable. I chose to love him so fiercely that the damage they'd done couldn't survive in our home. This wasn't the pretty kind of healing you see in movies, where everyone cries and hugs and the music swells. This was the messy, complicated, real kind of healing that happens when you stop trying to fix people who don't want to be fixed and start focusing on the ones who do. Mark and I built something beautiful from the ashes of his childhood. We created the family he'd always deserved, even if it was 30 years too late. We learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. That sometimes the healthiest choice looks like the hardest one. That sometimes protecting someone means making yourself the villain in someone else's story. My anger became my superpower. It taught me that love isn't always gentle. Sometimes love is fierce. Sometimes love is protective. Sometimes love says, "Enough," and means it. Sometimes love builds walls to keep the wolves out instead of bridges to let them in. I looked at Mark one evening as he laughed at something silly on television, completely relaxed and unguarded, and I felt that familiar surge of protective anger. But this time, it didn't hurt. This time, it felt like victory. 2 years have passed since we cut contact with Mark's parents. 2 years of building a life based on truth instead of pretense. 2 years of learning what healthy love looks like. 2 years of discovering who Mark really is when he's not trying to earn approval from people who will never give it. People ask me sometimes if I regret our decision, if I think we were too harsh, if I worry about Mark missing his family. The questions always come from people who've never lived with the aftermath of childhood abuse. People who think that blood relations automatically deserve loyalty. People who believe that time heals all wounds, even the ones that keep getting reopened. I don't regret anything. How could I regret watching my husband become himself? How could I regret creating a home where kindness isn't conditional? How could I regret protecting the person I love most from people who saw his gentleness as a weakness to exploit? Mark doesn't regret it either. He's a different person now. Confident in ways he never was before. Comfortable with his emotions instead of ashamed of them. Free to be excited, sad, worried, happy, or anything else without constantly monitoring other people's reactions. I used to think there was something wrong with me, he told me recently. I thought I was broken, defective, too much for anyone to handle. Now I know the truth. I was just a normal child living in an abnormal situation. That's the thing about abuse. It makes you believe the problem is you. It makes you think that if you could just be better, stronger, different, then the people who hurt you would finally love you properly. It takes years to understand that the problem was never you. The problem was them. I still carry anger, but it's different now. It's not the burning, urgent anger of someone actively fighting a battle. It's the steady, permanent anger of someone who has drawn a line in the sand and will never cross it again. It's the anger that says, never again, and means it. It's the anger that chooses love over politeness, truth over peace, protection over reconciliation. Some people think holding on to anger makes you bitter. I think holding on to the right kind of anger makes you strong. It makes you someone who won't compromise when it comes to protecting the people you love. It makes you someone who recognizes abuse and refuses to enable it. It makes you someone who understands that forgiveness isn't always healing, and healing isn't always forgiveness. Mark and I are planning to have children soon. When I think about becoming a mother, I feel that protective anger surge again. But this time, it's not about the past. It's about the future. It's about making sure no child in our home ever feels the way Mark felt growing up. It's about breaking cycles instead of perpetuating them. I will teach our children that their emotions are valid, that they don't have to earn love through performance, that family means safety, not survival, that adults who hurt children are wrong, regardless of their titles or excuses, that love isn't supposed to hurt. And if anyone ever tries to hurt my children the way Mark was hurt, they'll discover what righteous anger looks like. They'll learn that some mothers are lionesses, and lionesses don't forgive threats to their cubs. They'll understand that love sometimes wears armor and carries swords. I used to think forgiveness was always the right choice. I thought it made you the bigger person, the better person, the healed person. I thought anger was something to overcome, something to let go of, something that poisoned you from the inside. Now I know better. Now I know that some things don't deserve forgiveness. Some people haven't earned it. Some wounds shouldn't be forgotten. Some anger is holy, righteous, necessary, and true. I can't forgive my husband's parents. I won't forgive them. And I'm not sorry about that. My anger is a testament to their crimes and a promise that they'll never hurt him again. It's a monument to his survival and a guardian of his peace. Love isn't always soft. Sometimes love is steel. Sometimes love is a wall that keeps the monsters out. Sometimes love says, no more, and means it forever. If you've ever felt like me, you're not alone. If you've ever been told to forgive people who hurt someone you love, know that you don't have to. If you've ever been called bitter for protecting someone from their abusers, know that bitterness is just another word for boundaries. If you've ever chosen love over forgiveness, truth over peace, protection over reconciliation, know that you chose right. Some anger is sacred. Some walls are necessary. Some bridges need to stay burned. And some fights are worth having, even if, especially if, you're fighting alone. You are not responsible for healing people who refuse to admit they're broken. You are not obligated to forgive people who aren't sorry. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Your anger matters. Your boundaries matter. Your protection of innocent people matters. Your refusal to enable abuse matters. Trust your instincts. Protect your people. Stay angry when anger serves love. And never ever apologize for refusing to forgive the unforgivable. You're not alone. You're not wrong. You're not too much. You're exactly what the people you love needed all along.